The dream that never burned. History tells us the Library of Alexandria was wounded by Caesar's fire, crushed by Theodosius' decree, silenced by religious zeal, and perhaps finished by Omar's conquest. But in this alternate timeline, none of those blows are fatal. Imagine, the flames are contained in Caesar's siege, leaving the scrolls untouched. Theodosius bans paganism, but moderate Christian scholars shield the Serapeum, preserving its manuscripts. Hypatia dies, but her students scatter with her texts, rebuilding the collection in secret. When Arabs arrive in 642 CE, instead of destruction, they see the library as treasure and guard it, translating its works into Arabic while keeping the originals intact. In this world, the library never fades. It grows, thrives, and bridges civilizations, a continuous chain of memory. In our history, knowledge was fractured, carried in fragments through monasteries, revived piecemeal in Baghdad, reborn in Europe centuries later. But here, the chain is unbroken. From 300 BCE onward, scholars copy scrolls tirelessly, keeping every text alive. Works of Herophilos and Galen flow seamlessly into the hands of later physicians. Hero's mechanical inventions are not lost, but built upon by generations. Aristarchus's heliocentric model becomes common knowledge, debated openly for centuries. Philosophers of Greece, India, China, and Africa all see their works preserved side by side. Instead of fragments, humanity carries a whole tapestry of thought. The result? Progress that in our world took millennia now accelerates in mere centuries. Alexandria, heart of the world. By the 1st century CE, Alexandria in this timeline is not only a city of trade and culture, but the undisputed capital of knowledge on earth. Ships bring not only grain, but manuscripts from Rome, from India, from China, via the Silk Road. Scholars from every corner of the known world gather here. Greek philosophers, Jewish scribes, Egyptian priests, Indian mathematicians, African historians, Chinese astronomers. The Ptolemies' dream of universality becomes reality. Alexandria is the first true global university. The library becomes not just a collection, but an engine of invention. Ideas cross-pollinate, leading to discoveries that in our world were centuries apart. Mini-story, the Roman engineer. Picture a Roman engineer around 100 CE standing in the library's halls. He reads Hero's scroll describing a steam-powered device, the Aeolipile. In our history, it was a curiosity, but in this world, he is inspired. He sketches plans for larger machines, pistons, wheels, pumps. Rome, already master of aqueducts and roads, begins experimenting with steam engines. By the 2nd century, factories churn grain, presses mint coins, engines, power mills. The seeds of the Industrial Revolution sprout in antiquity. Rome does not merely rule by legion, it rules by machine. The network of knowledge. The library's survival means that copying and translation never stop. As papyrus decays, parchment replaces it. As parchment is heavy, codices, early books, become the standard far earlier than in our world. The Ptolemies' dream of translating everything into Greek expands. By 200 CE, the Vedas of India, translated into Greek, introduce concepts of mathematics, philosophy, and spirituality. Chinese records on astronomy and medicine travel west. African oral histories are written and preserved, giving voice to kingdoms often erased from mainstream history. The library becomes not Greek, not Egyptian, not Roman, but human, the first universities. By the 3rd century CE, Alexandria has evolved beyond a library into a network of universities. Funded by emperors and sustained by merchants, scholars are salaried, research is sponsored, inventions are tested. Instead of isolated geniuses like Archimedes or Eratosthenes, thousands of minds work in collaboration, discoveries compound. Knowledge is no longer the fragile possession of a few, it becomes a system, structured, permanent. Mini-story, the map that changed the world. In this alternate timeline, a scroll of Eratosthenes' Earth measurements is preserved, studied, and widely known. By 200 CE, it is common knowledge that the Earth is round, about 40,000 kilometers in circumference. Merchants and sailors, guided by improved maps, venture farther than ever before. Roman and Indian ships cross the Indian Ocean regularly. By 300 CE, Roman merchants reached the coast of East Africa and perhaps even glimpse Australia. The age of exploration arrives 1,200 years early. A literacy revolution. With the library's survival, literacy spreads beyond elites. As scrolls become codices and codices become printed earlier, books reach merchants, artisans, even farmers. By 400 CE, instead of only priests and nobles reading, entire communities are literate. The world becomes less dependent on oral tradition, more reliant on written record. Memory expands. Progress accelerates. Faith meets knowledge. Religion is not erased in this world. It thrives. But it thrives differently. Christianity grows, but surrounded by rival gospels preserved in Alexandria, it remains less dogmatic, more philosophical. Judaism, with access to wider scientific texts, develops theological schools where reason and faith walk together. Islam emerges into a world where Greek astronomy and Indian medicine are already global knowledge. Instead of banning pagan science, Islamic scholars embrace it from the start. The great wars of religion still exist, but they are tempered by a wider base of knowledge. Fanaticism struggles to silence reason when scrolls are everywhere. The human spirit transformed. What does it mean to live in a world where knowledge is secure? Children grow up not fearing ignorance, but basking in curiosity. Scholars know their work will not be lost, but preserved for eternity. Civilizations rise not by conquest alone, but by invention, trade, and innovation. The library becomes a symbol not of fragility, but of permanence. Humanity steps onto a path of advancement centuries earlier. In this alternate timeline, the Library of Alexandria never falls. It survives wars, outlasts zealotry, adapts to new rulers, and becomes the continuous memory of mankind. And with this continuity, humanity leaps forward. The stage is set for revolutions in science, medicine, and exploration, centuries before they arrived in our own history. The dream did not burn. It lived, and in living, it reshaped everything. The seeds of science. In our history, knowledge was fragile. Ideas bloomed, then were forgotten, rediscovered centuries later. But in this alternate world, where the Library of Alexandria survives, the chain of discovery is never broken. Every scroll is preserved, every experiment recorded, every idea built upon. Instead of starting from scratch after each dark age, humanity layers progress upon progress. By the 2nd century CE, science is already centuries ahead of our timeline. By the 5th century, humanity stands where we stood in the 18th. By the 10th, perhaps where we were in the 20th. Medicine without centuries of delay. One of the library's greatest treasures was medical knowledge. Herophilos and Erasistratus dissected human bodies and described the nervous system, arteries, and organs in detail. In our timeline, their works were lost, remembered only through fragments. But here, their scrolls are preserved and studied continuously. Anatomy. By 200 CE, physicians openly study the brain, heart, and nervous system. Surgery becomes precise, not guesswork. Antiseptics. Ancient Indian and Egyptian practices using herbs and alcohol are combined with Greek techniques, leading to early antiseptic methods. Vaccination-like practices. Knowledge of smallpox inoculation from India and China reaches Europe through Alexandria by the 3rd century. Epidemics are contained before they devastate. Longer lifespans. By the fall of Rome, average life expectancy is already climbing beyond 50 years. By the Middle Ages, it rivals our modern age. Plagues that ravaged our history. The Antonine Plague, the Justinian Plague, the Black Death are mitigated or eradicated. Millions live who, in our timeline, died. The demographic structure of the world changes completely. Mini story. The healer of Rome. Imagine a physician in Rome around 250 CE. In our history, he might have used superstition, bleeding, or charms. But in this alternate world, he consults scrolls from Alexandria, detailed anatomy from Herophilos, surgical procedures from India, herbal remedies from China. When plague strikes, he inoculates citizens using crushed scabs of survivors, an idea carried from Chinese medicine. Death tolls fall. The empire does not weaken as it did in our world. History bends. The Industrial Revolution of Antiquity, hero of Alexandria's steam engine, the Aeolipile, was little more than a toy in our timeline. But here it is the seed of an industrial age in antiquity. By 100 CE, engineers scale heroes' designs to pumps, presses, and mills. By 200 CE, Rome builds steam-powered galleys, reducing dependence on wind and ore. By 400 CE, factories emerge, producing cloth, metal tools, and food at scales unimaginable in our history. Slavery declines earlier as machines replace human labor. Rome does not crumble under economic strain, it transforms into a machine-powered empire. Astronomy. A universe revealed. The library preserved not only Greek astronomy but Babylonian star charts, Indian cosmology, and Chinese observations. Together, they form a foundation for rapid advancement. Aristarchus' heliocentric theory, the Earth revolving around the Sun, is widely accepted by 200 CE. Telescope-like devices emerged centuries earlier as optics from Alexandria's scholars merge with Chinese lens-making. By 400 CE, astronomers chart the moons of Jupiter, the phases of Venus, and predict eclipses with accuracy. Astrology loses ground, replaced by early astrophysics. Instead of Galileo in 1609, a Roman or Byzantine astronomer peers through a telescope in 300 CE and declares, "The heavens are many, and we are not the center." Navigation and exploration, accurate maps and astronomy revolutionized navigation, with Eratosthenes' measurement of Earth's circumference preserved and accepted. Sailors know the planet is round centuries before Columbus. By 200 CE, Roman, Indian, and Arab merchants sail confidently across the Indian Ocean. By 400 CE, expeditions reach West Africa and perhaps even touch the Americas. By 600 CE, transatlantic trade routes exist, connecting the Old and New worlds. Imagine, maize in Rome by 500 CE, potatoes in Egypt, African crops in Europe, Chinese silk in Mexico. The Columbian Exchange happens 1,000 years early. Mini story, the voyage to the West. In this world, around 350 CE, a fleet sponsored by the Roman Senate departs from Spain. Equipped with advanced navigation, they cross the Atlantic. After months at sea, they reach the Caribbean. They do not conquer immediately, Rome lacks the numbers, but they trade, bringing back corn, cocoa, and gold. The Americas are no longer isolated. Humanity becomes one interconnected world a millennium before our own age of exploration. The scientific method born. Early in our history, the scientific method of experimentation and evidence took root in the Renaissance. But in this alternate world, with texts preserved, debate and testing become the norm centuries earlier. By 300 CE, scholars use controlled experiments to test medical and mechanical theories. By 500 CE, scientific academies across the Mediterranean rival our modern universities. By 1000 CE, global scientific conferences link Alexandria, Baghdad, India, and China. The age of superstition fades quickly. Rational inquiry becomes the heartbeat of civilization. Weapons and war knowledge has a double edge. Gunpowder, discovered in China, reaches Alexandria by 400 CE. Combined with Greek engineering, cannons appear in antiquity. By 600 CE, empires field armies with advanced siege weapons, steel armor, and even early rockets. Wars are deadlier, empires larger, the balance of power shifts constantly. The same knowledge that cures disease also builds machines of death. The world is more advanced, but also more dangerous. The leap beyond Earth. Perhaps the boldest change is humanity's relationship with the stars. By 800 CE, with centuries of uninterrupted astronomy, speculation about other worlds flourishes. By 1000 CE, advanced optics and mathematics allow predictions of planetary motions with precision. By 1200 CE, experimental rockets are launched, inspired by Chinese fire arrows, but refined with Alexandrian engineering. By 1400 CE, in this world, humans step onto the moon. Where our history crawled to space in the 20th century, this timeline sprints by the 15th. In this alternate history, science does not wait. Medicine leaps centuries ahead, saving millions. Machines spark an industrial revolution in antiquity. Astronomy reshapes humanity's place in the universe. Exploration unites the world a millennium early. But with these leaps come new dangers. Advanced weapons, faster wars, empires fueled by machines. Knowledge is not a gentle master. It is a force that can shape the world for better or worse. The question becomes, in a world where science leaps forward, what happens to faith, to culture, to the very soul of humanity? The crossroads of faith and knowledge religion shaped empires, kings, and wars as much as swords and armies. In our history, knowledge often bent beneath the weight of faith. But in a world where the Library of Alexandria never fell, the relationship between religion and knowledge shifts. The library's mission was universal, to gather every scroll, every scripture, every philosophy. That meant Christian Gospels beside Jewish Torahs, Buddhist sutras beside Hindu Vedas, Egyptian hymns beside Babylonian epics. Where most temples housed only their gods, Alexandria housed them all. This pluralism, preserved and copied for centuries, prevents one faith from silencing the others. The result? Religion evolves in dialogue, not in isolation. Christianity without the Dark Ages. In our world, Christianity grew under Roman persecution, triumphed under Constantine, and eventually reshaped Europe. But it also suppressed rival gospels and philosophies, branding them heresy. Here, that suppression fails. The library preserves the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, the Shepherd of Hermas, and countless other texts. When Constantine embraces Christianity, he cannot erase what Alexandria keeps safe. Scholars and bishops cannot agree on one canon when rival scriptures circulate in every city. Instead of one rigid orthodoxy, Christianity becomes a family of philosophies. Some sects view Jesus as divine, others as teacher, prophet, or philosopher. Councils still debate doctrine, but knowledge of alternatives weakens their authority. The church still rises, but its power is tempered. In Europe, theology develops alongside medicine and astronomy, not against them. There is no Galileo forced to recant, because Aristarchus' heliocentric model has been mainstream for centuries. Judaism, in a world of dialogue Judaism, long rooted in scripture and tradition, gains new avenues of interpretation. In this timeline, Jewish scholars in Alexandria cross-examined the Torah with Babylonian astronomy, Indian philosophy, and Greek ethics. Rabbinic traditions flourish, blending reason and faith. The Septuagint is not the only translation. Commentaries multiply, ensuring no single interpretation dominates. Jewish communities across the Mediterranean gain prestige as preservers of both spiritual and scientific wisdom. Instead of being marginalized, Judaism holds greater influence in shaping global dialogue. Islam, in an enlightened world, Islam emerged in the 7th century, uniting Arabia with a message of monotheism, justice, and knowledge. In our history, Muslim scholars later preserved fragments of Greek learning, fueling the Islamic Golden Age. But in this alternate world, when the Arabs conquer Egypt, they find not remnants, but the whole library intact. Caliphs embrace Alexandria's scrolls as treasure. Instead of centuries of translation in Baghdad alone, the Islamic Golden Age begins instantly in the 7th century. The Quran is read not in isolation, but in conversation with Aristotle, Archimedes, Indian medicine, and Chinese astronomy. Islam's scholars, already committed to knowledge, take the library's dream global. The result is staggering. By 800 CE, the Islamic world is not just advanced, it is the world's undisputed intellectual leader, centuries ahead of our timeline. Eastern religions in global conversation. The library ensures Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism are not confined to Asia. By 200 CE, translations of the Vedas, Upanishads, Buddhist sutras, and Confucian classics circulate in Alexandria. Greek philosophers debate karma and reincarnation alongside Plato's forms. Roman emperors read Confucian texts on governance. Buddhist ethics influence Christian monastic traditions. The result is a fusion of philosophies. East and West are not separate, but engaged in constant exchange. By 500 CE, the world's religions are aware of each other's wisdom, shaping a more interconnected spiritual landscape. The decline of dogma. In our history, dogma often crushed inquiry. The Inquisition silenced heresy, the Crusades drowned out reason, and dissenters were burned as witches. But in this alternate timeline, dogma cannot dominate so easily. Why? Because every time zealots try to suppress knowledge, the library answers back. If a priest declares the earth flat, Alexandrian records prove otherwise. If rulers ban heresy, rival gospels circulate freely. Instead of suppression, religions adapt. Faith bends, flexes, and grows alongside knowledge. Mini-story. The council that couldn't decide. In 325 CE, Constantine called the Council of Nicaea to unify Christian belief. In our history, it declared Jesus of the same substance as God and exiled dissenters. But in this alternate world, Alexandrian scholars arrive with crates of preserved gospels, each giving different visions of Christ. The council argues for months. They cannot silence the alternatives. In the end, they acknowledge diversity, declaring multiple interpretations valid. Christianity becomes less empire and more mosaic. The great schisms of later centuries are softened because plurality is baked in from the beginning, faith and reason as allies. By the Middle Ages of this timeline, science and faith walk side by side. Monasteries preserve both scriptures and mechanical blueprints. Mosques teach both Quran and geometry. Temples serve as both places of worship and centers of medicine. This does not mean conflict disappears. Religion still inspires wars, zealots still burn, but the balance tilts differently. Faith is not the enemy of reason, because reason has never been absent. The absence of the Dark Ages. In our world, after Rome's fall, Europe slid into centuries of stagnation, the so-called Dark Ages. Knowledge fragmented, literacy declined, superstition ruled. But in this timeline, the library ensures continuity. Rome falls, but its engineers, armed with Alexandrian scrolls, rebuild in successor kingdoms. Christianity spreads, but alongside rival knowledge that prevents total domination. Universities appear in 500 CE, not 1200 CE. By 1000 CE, Europe is already industrialized. The Dark Ages never come. The Renaissance is not a rebirth, but a continuous flowering that never stopped. Mini-story, the abbot and the astronomer. Picture a monastery in France around 600 CE. In our history, monks copied Bibles in dim light, often with little knowledge of the outside world. Here, the abbot sits with an Alexandrian astronomer. Together, they chart the heavens using telescopes inspired by Hero's optics. They debate scripture in light of planetary motions, writing commentaries that reconcile Genesis with heliocentrism. Religion still guides their lives, but knowledge is not feared, it is embraced. A world of tolerant faiths? Does this mean religion becomes peaceful and tolerant in this world? Not entirely. Faith still fuels wars, divisions, and politics. But without monopolies of knowledge, no single church, caliphate, or temple can claim absolute authority. Crusades may still happen, but with science-driven empires on both sides, they look more like rival industrial wars. The Inquisition may try to silence dissent, but it cannot erase centuries of preserved scrolls. Witch hunts may be rare, because diseases are explained scientifically centuries earlier. The result is not a utopia, but a world where faith and reason constantly check each other. In this alternate history, religion evolves in the presence of knowledge. Christianity grows, but as a mosaic. Judaism thrives in dialogue. Islam inherits the full treasure of antiquity. Eastern traditions spread westward. The wars of faith still exist, but softened, reshaped by reason. The Dark Ages never come. The Renaissance is never needed. Humanity moves forward, guided by both scripture and science. And with faith tempered and science unleashed, empires themselves begin to look very different. That is where we turn next. Rome with machines. In our timeline, the Roman Empire peaked in the 2nd century CE and then declined, weakened by plagues, economic stagnation, and military overreach. But in this alternate history, Rome possesses the accumulated knowledge of Alexandria, medicine to fight plagues, technology to power machines, astronomy to navigate seas. Plagues are contained. Inoculation prevents pandemics like the Antonine and Justinian plagues, which in our history devastated populations and armies. Steam power rises. Heroes' designs inspire engineers to build engines. By 200 CE, Roman aqueducts and mills are supplemented by steam-driven pumps and cranes. Industrial Rome. By 400 CE, Rome has rail-like carts powered by engines, factories mass-producing tools, and steamships crossing the Mediterranean. Rome does not fall in 476 CE. Instead, it transforms into a machine empire, ruling through technology as well as legions. Mini-story, the Steam Legion. Picture a Roman legion marching into Germania around 300 CE. Alongside swords and shields, they deploy steam-powered artillery, cannons mounted on wheeled platforms, firing iron balls. Fortresses that once resisted siege engines crumble in days. The tribes of Europe cannot compete. Rome pushes further, colonizing lands that in our world remained beyond its reach. Its empire stretches deeper into Africa, Asia, and Northern Europe. Africa, empowered. In our world, Africa's history is often told through the lens of colonization. But in this alternate world, the library ensures African knowledge is preserved and elevated. Egyptian medicine, Nubian metallurgy, and Ethiopian astronomy are recorded in Alexandrian scrolls, giving Africa prestige as a co-guardian of wisdom. Trade routes across the Sahara are mapped early, linking West African kingdoms like Mali to Rome by 200 CE. By 500 CE, African empires export not only gold and salt, but advanced engineering and science. When Europe industrializes centuries later in our history, Africa becomes its victim. But here, Africa is already industrialized, armed with machines and knowledge. Colonization never happens. Africa is a global power from the start. Asia, connected earlier. The library bridges east and west far earlier than the Silk Road alone ever could. By 200 CE, Indian numerals, the future Arabic numerals, reach Europe. Complex mathematics, including zero, revolutionizes Roman accounting and science. By 300 CE, Chinese paper replaces parchment, making books cheap and plentiful. Printing presses follow soon after. Gunpowder, known in China by 800 CE in our history, spreads centuries earlier. By 300 CE, Roman and Persian armies use primitive firearms. Asia is not an isolated giant, but a co-architect of global knowledge, the fate of Europe. In our timeline, Europe after Rome's fall endured centuries of stagnation, but in this alternate world, Rome never collapses completely. Even as Western provinces weaken, the empire's infrastructure, factories, medicine, libraries, keeps knowledge flowing. By 800 CE, Europe is already fully industrialized, centuries before our Renaissance. Castles are replaced by factories. Knights ride not horses, but steam-powered vehicles. Literacy is widespread. Superstition gives way to reason. The Viking raids that terrorized Europe in our history fail against industrial defenses. Instead of conquest, Norsemen integrate into the technological world, their shipbuilding enhanced by Alexandrian blueprints. The Americas enter the story early. Perhaps the greatest divergence lies across the Atlantic. In our world, the Americas remained isolated until Columbus in 1492. But with accurate maps and advanced navigation from Alexandria, contact occurs centuries earlier. By 400 CE, Roman explorers reach the Caribbean and trade with indigenous peoples. By 600 CE, the Inca, Maya, and Roman merchants exchange goods. Potatoes, corn, and chocolate flow into Europe, while steel tools and written scripts enter the Americas. Instead of conquest, a long process of cultural exchange begins. The Americas are not decimated by sudden disease outbreaks because inoculation and medicine already exist in this alternate timeline. The result is a connected world 1,000 years earlier. Mini-story, the Aztec-Roman embassy. Around 700 CE, an embassy from Mesoamerica sails into Alexandria. They bring cocoa, maize, and feathers, and are astonished by steam engines, telescopes, and parchment books. Alexandrian scholars record their myths and compare them with Greek and Egyptian stories. For the first time in history, all continents are linked in knowledge. Colonialism rewritten. In our world, European colonialism dominated the 15th to 19th centuries, fueled by technological superiority. But in this alternate history, no region holds monopoly over machines or science. Africa, Asia, and the Americas industrialize early, making them equals to Europe. Empires expand, but no continent becomes global master. Colonization as we know it, Europe carving up Africa, enslaving millions, never occurs. Instead, competition is multipolar, with many powers rising together. The transatlantic slave trade, which scarred history, never emerges. Machines replace forced labor, and Africa stands too strong to be exploited. Humanity avoids one of its darkest chapters: global multipolarity. By 1000 CE in this timeline, Rome remained strong, ruling the Mediterranean with industry. African empires flourish, rich in gold and science. India thrives, exporting mathematics and medicine. China leads in paper, printing, and gunpowder. The Americas stand connected, contributing crops, ideas, and labor to the global system. The world is not dominated by one empire, but a balance of powers, centuries earlier than our real-world modern system. The double-edged sword of power, yet with equal strength comes equal danger. Advanced weapons mean wars are more destructive. Industrialized empires clash not with swords, but with cannons and machines. By 1000 CE, global wars resemble our world wars, fought with mass-produced weapons and advanced tactics. Millions may die earlier than in our history, not from plagues, but from industrial conflict. Empires rise and fall quickly, fueled by machines that make conquest rapid but unstable. Knowledge equalizes power, but it also magnifies destruction. In this alternate world, empires are rewritten. Rome becomes a machine empire, Africa rises as a co-equal, Asia connects earlier, and the Americas join the global stage a millennium sooner. Colonialism as we know it never occurs. Instead, humanity becomes multipolar far earlier. The result is a world both richer and more dangerous, where no region dominates, but all advance together. And with stronger empires and healthier populations, the human experience itself changes. That is where we turn next. Life without the Dark Ages. In our timeline, daily life for most humans across history was harsh. Short lifespans, superstition, disease, hunger, endless wars. But in this alternate world, where knowledge was preserved and built upon, the human experience is radically different. Healthier lives. By 500 CE, average life expectancy exceeds 60 years thanks to vaccines, antiseptics, and improved diets. By 1000 CE, it rivals our modern standards. Less superstition, with science explaining disease, eclipses, and the stars. Fear-driven practices like witch hunts never gained traction. Education widespread. By 400 CE, literacy spreads beyond elites. By 1000 CE, entire populations can read, making knowledge communal, not elitist. The rhythm of life is transformed. Humanity does not spend centuries in survival mode, but steps earlier into curiosity, creativity, and innovation. Art and culture in a knowledge-rich world. Knowledge feeds art as much as science. When painters, musicians, and poets live in societies free from plagues and famine, they can explore new ideas. Architecture. By 600 CE, cities feature skyscraper-like towers powered by elevators driven by steam. Glass-making and optics lead to massive stained glass structures centuries before our Gothic cathedrals. Music. Cross-cultural exchange brings African rhythms, Indian ragas, and European chants together a millennium earlier. The global symphony begins not in the 19th century, but in the 5th. Philosophy. Instead of isolated schools, Stoics, Buddhists, Confucians, global academies debate ethics. What is justice when machines do labor? What is morality in a world where nations possess deadly cannons by 500 CE? The cultural renaissance never ends. It begins early and grows without pause. Slavery and human rights. One of the darkest institutions in our history is slavery. In this alternate timeline, machines replace slaves centuries earlier, reducing the economic need for forced labor. By 200 CE, Rome experiments with steam-powered factories, diminishing dependence on slaves. By 400 CE, slavery is seen as inefficient compared to machines. Ethical debates in Alexandria and Rome accelerate abolitionist philosophies. By 600 CE, slavery is abolished in much of the known world. Without the transatlantic slave trade, Africa's population is never depleted, its kingdoms never destabilized. Human rights discourse begins 1,000 years early. Mini-story. The debate in Alexandria. Around 350 CE, a debate takes place in Alexandria's amphitheater. Scholars present arguments. If machines can work fields and mills, why enslave men? Philosophers argue that forced labor is both unnecessary and immoral. Citizens cheer as the city council passes a decree limiting slavery. This moment, small in scale, ripples outward, inspiring empires to rethink human dignity. 1,000 years before the Enlightenment, liberty becomes a serious philosophical movement. Globalization millennia early. In our history, the Columbian Exchange, 1492 onward, transformed diets and societies. Here, it happens by 400 CE. Corn, potatoes, and tomatoes reach Europe a millennium earlier. Wheat, grapes, and olives spread into the Americas before the Aztec and Inca empires. Silk, spices, and tea flow across oceans with Roman Asian fleets. Coffee is sipped in Alexandria in 600 CE, not 1500 CE. The world is interconnected far earlier, creating a truly global civilization by 1000 CE. Women in a knowledge-rich world. The preservation of texts, like Hypatia's writings, and Indian, Chinese, and African philosophies, challenges patriarchal structures earlier. Female scholars and physicians rise in prominence by 300 CE. By 600 CE, universities admit women in some regions. Gender equality progresses unevenly but far faster than in our timeline. Instead of waiting until the 20th century, the women's rights movement emerges in antiquity. Wars of knowledge. Of course, knowledge is not only benevolent. Empires armed with machines and medicine fight on scales unimaginable in our timeline. By 800 CE, global wars resemble our 20th century conflicts, fought with cannons, rockets, and industrial supply chains. Millions perish, but millions more alive due to medicine. Populations rebound quickly, Alliances form earlier: Rome, Africa, Asia, and the Americas, creating coalitions centuries before our League of Nations. The paradox emerges: knowledge saves lives, but also destroys them. The leap to the stars. Perhaps the most profound change lies in humanity's relationship with the cosmos. By 400 CE, heliocentrism is common knowledge. By 600 CE, telescopes reveal Saturn's rings and galaxies beyond the Milky Way. By 1000 CE, experimental rockets, refined from Chinese firework designs, launch objects into orbit. By 1400 CE, humans walk on the moon. By 1600 CE, Mars is colonized. The 20th century space race of our timeline occurs 1,000 years earlier. Humanity enters the stars not as fractured nations, but as a global civilization bound by centuries of shared knowledge. Mini story: the Alexandrian astronaut. In this timeline, the year is 1450 CE. An Egyptian scientist named Elia, trained in mathematics preserved from Alexandria's scrolls and astronomy from Indian text, becomes the first human to walk on the moon. She carries with her a scroll from the ancient library, symbolizing 2,000 years of continuous memory. The world watches not from television, but from public observatories, united in awe. Humanity realizes the library's dream has carried them beyond Earth. The world today, in this timeline. If the library had survived, what would 2025 look like? Technology. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and biotechnology are not decades old, but centuries old. Humanity has had time to refine them ethically. Medicine, cancer, HIV, and countless diseases are long cured. Life expectancy exceeds 120 years. Society. Borders exist, but global institutions maintain peace, forged over 1,000 years of shared progress. The environment. Machines arrive early, but so does awareness. Climate change is mitigated centuries before it becomes a crisis. The cosmos. Humanity is not confined to Earth. Cities exist on Mars. Mining stations orbit Saturn, and probes explore other star systems. The library's survival transforms not only history, but destiny. Humanity, no longer slowed by ignorance, becomes a species of the cosmos. This is the great what if of Alexandria. A world without dark ages, without colonialism, without centuries of delay. A world where medicine saves billions, where slavery dies early, where women rise alongside men, where empires compete but none dominate, and where humanity reaches the stars long before our own age. It is not a utopia. Wars still rage, power still corrupts, but it is a world profoundly different, profoundly advanced. And as we imagine this alternate destiny, we must ask, why did we not achieve it? Why did we let the library burn? That question leads us into Chapter 4, a reflection on what the library's loss means for us today, and what lessons we can still learn from the greatest what if in history. A ruin that still stands in the mind. The Library of Alexandria no longer exists. Its shelves have long turned to dust, its scrolls crumbled, its walls broken. And yet, in some ways, it is more present now than it ever was when it stood. Why? Because the library has become a myth, a story larger than life. We remember it not as it truly was, because truth is hazy, but as what it could have been, a place where all human knowledge was once gathered and where that knowledge was tragically lost. In this sense, the library is not just a ruin. It is an idea, eternal and unshakable, etched into our collective memory. The dream of universality. What made the library so powerful was not only its size, but its ambition. The Ptolemies dreamed of gathering every scroll in the world. Ships entering Alexandria's harbor were searched for manuscripts. Originals were kept, copies returned. Travelers brought texts from India, Babylon, Greece, and beyond. The dream was audacious, that all truth could live under one roof, accessible to those who sought it. In our modern age, we see reflections of this dream in projects like the Internet, Wikipedia, or global archives. But in antiquity, it was revolutionary. No other civilization had dared to imagine that all wisdom could be owned, preserved, and shared. The library became the first attempt at a memory for all humanity, and that is why its destruction resonates so deeply. The myth of its destruction. Part of what gives the library its symbolic power is not just that it was lost, but how. Its destruction has been told and retold in countless forms. Caesar's fire in 48 BCE, the Christian mobs in 391 CE, the Arab conquest in 642 CE. Each version reflects the anxieties of those who told it, the carelessness of war, the intolerance of religion, the arrogance of rulers. In reality, the library may not have perished in one dramatic night, but in centuries of neglect. Yet the myth matters more than the fact. We picture scrolls curling into flame, smoke rising, wisdom vanishing in an instant. This image sears itself into imagination because it speaks to a universal fear that knowledge can be lost forever. The library in literature. Writers across the centuries have invoked the library as a symbol of lost potential. Jorge Luis Borges, in his story The Library of Babel, imagined a library containing all possible books, truths, lies, nonsense, and meaning, all at once. For Borges, Alexandria was the seed of this idea, the dream of totality, of capturing everything. Carl Sagan called the library's loss the greatest intellectual catastrophe in history. He mourned not only the scrolls, but the centuries of progress humanity never had. Poets have written of its flames as though they were funeral pyres for civilization itself. Each time the library appears in literature, it is less a building and more a mirror, reflecting our longing for knowledge and our fear of forgetting, a symbol of human fragility. The library also stands as a reminder of how fragile civilization is. Great empires rise and fall, great inventions vanish, great works are forgotten. One fire, one decree, one careless moment, and thousands of years of memory can be erased. This fragility is not unique to Alexandria. The Mayan codices burned by conquistadors, the House of Wisdom destroyed by Mongols, the countless libraries lost in wars, all repeat the same tragedy. But Alexandria is the most famous because its ambition was the greatest. When we think of the library, we do not just think of papyrus scrolls. We think of ourselves, of how easily all that we have built could vanish. Minnie's story, the poet and the ashes. Imagine an Alexandrian poet walking through the city after one of the fires. The air still smells of smoke. Ash drifts in the wind, black flakes that once held the words of Aristotle or forgotten prophets. He kneels, scoops up a handful of ashes and whispers, "These are the voices of the dead." For him, the fire's not just loss, it is erasure, a silence deeper than death because it leaves no memory behind. This image, ash as words, smoke as thought, became a lasting metaphor. Every time knowledge is lost, we recall that poet's grief. The library as a warning. The library is not only a dream and a tragedy, it is a warning. It warns us that knowledge is not safe unless it is protected. It warns us that rulers, religions, and armies can silence memory as easily as speech. It warns us that what is lost once may never be regained. In every age, people have looked at Alexandria and asked, are we making the same mistake? When digital files vanish in a crash, when books are banned, when archives are destroyed, the library's ghost stirs. It asks, will you let this happen again? Why the myth persists. The library endures in imagination because it speaks to something primal, our fear of forgetting. Each of us knows what it is to lose a memory, something once vivid, now gone forever. The library is that fear scaled to humanity. The idea that entire civilizations can forget, that truths can vanish before they are even known. But the myth also persists because it speaks to hope. If we dream of the library, it is because we believe in its possibility. We believe that one day knowledge can be preserved, shared, made eternal. The Library of Alexandria stands not as stone or ash, but as symbol of ambition, of fragility, of loss, and of longing. It is both a tragedy and an inspiration. We grieve what was lost, but we also dream of what might yet be built. Its myth reminds us that knowledge is precious, that memory must be guarded, that truth is a treasure beyond price. And from this symbol, we turn to its lesson. Knowledge is fragile. It can be lost to fire, to zeal, to time. That is where we turn next. The fragile nature of memory. Knowledge is not stone. It is ink on papyrus, symbols on parchment, words spoken and remembered. Unlike pyramids or temples, it does not stand against centuries of wind and rain. Without constant care, copying, teaching, preserving, it fades. The Library of Alexandria reminds us of this fragility. Thousands of scrolls written by brilliant minds vanished not because the ideas were false, but because the physical vessels holding them could not withstand neglect or destruction. And Alexandria is not alone. Again and again, human civilization has seen wisdom dissolve into silence. The House of Wisdom, Baghdad, 1258. If Alexandria was the jewel of the ancient world, Baghdad's House of Wisdom was its medieval twin. Founded in the 8th century, it gathered texts from Greece, Persia, India, and China. Scholars there translated Aristotle, developed algebra, charted the stars, and revolutionized medicine. But in 1258, the Mongols under Hulagu Khan stormed Baghdad. The House of Wisdom was sacked, its scholars slain, its books hurled into the Tigris River. Chroniclers wrote that the waters ran black with ink and red with blood. Centuries of brilliance were erased in a week. Once again, humanity lost treasures of memory not to time, but to conquest. The Mayan codices, 16th century. In the New World, another library existed, not in stone halls, but in bark paper books. The Maya recorded astronomy, rituals, history, and mathematics in folded codices. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they burned nearly all of them. Only 4 authentic codices survive today. The rest, thousands of years of knowledge, turned to ash in the name of saving souls. Imagine if European scholars had preserved them instead. Mayan astronomy rivaled that of the Old World. Their calendars tracked celestial cycles with astonishing accuracy. Their medical knowledge was rich, their philosophy profound. All gone. The burning of Nalanda, India, 1293. Nalanda University in India was another wonder of the world, a vast Buddhist center of learning, housing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. When invaders under Bakhtiar Khilji attacked in 1293, They set fire to its libraries. The blaze is said to have burned for months. Entire canons of Buddhist scripture, unique medical texts, and scientific treatises were lost. Nalanda's fall crippled Indian intellectual life for centuries. Mini-story: The Soldier and the Scroll. Picture a soldier in Baghdad in 1258, standing in the ruins of the House of Wisdom. He picks up a manuscript, its pages filled with geometry and astronomy. He cannot read it. To him, it is meaningless. He tears it and throws it into the river. To him, it is nothing. To us, it was everything. This is the tragedy of fragility. Knowledge survives only if valued. The wars of Europe, even in modern times, knowledge has burned. In 1914, the German army destroyed the University Library of Leuven in Belgium, burning 300,000 books and medieval manuscripts. In World War II, the National Library of Warsaw was systematically destroyed by Nazi forces, erasing centuries of Polish culture. In the Bosnian War of the 1990s, Sarajevo's library was shelled, its collections lost in flames. The lesson? Even in the age of print, knowledge is not invincible. War silences memory as easily now as in antiquity. The silent enemy, time. Not all losses come in fire. Time itself is a quiet destroyer. Papyrus, unless recopied, crumbles to dust in centuries. Parchment rots in damp. Even digital media decays. CDs, hard drives, servers all have lifespans. Every generation must choose whether to copy, translate, and preserve. If they do not, wisdom vanishes, not in fire, but in silence. How many works were lost not because they were burned, but because no one cared enough to protect them? The digital Alexandria. Today, we live in an age where nearly all knowledge is digitized. At first glance, this seems invincible. How could the internet ever burn? But digital knowledge is as fragile as papyrus. Servers crash. Companies fail. Governments censor. Files corrupt. Formats become obsolete. The myth of Alexandria warns us, do not assume permanence. Without backups, without redundancy, without global protection, even the internet could vanish in parts. We could repeat the same tragedy on a planetary scale. Mini-story: The Lost Hard Drive. In 2013, a British man accidentally threw away a hard drive containing 8,000 bitcoins. Today, its value is billions. That was money. But imagine a drive containing a cure, a theory, a history, discarded, erased, forgotten. One man's mistake is personal tragedy. But if humanity repeats it, it becomes Alexandria all over again. The lesson of fragility. What do these stories teach? Knowledge is not self-preserving. It demands caretakers, scribes, archivists, librarians, servers, coders. Knowledge is vulnerable to power. Armies, zealots, and rulers can erase memory in an instant. Knowledge fades when neglected. Silence kills as surely as fire. Alexandria is the most famous tragedy, but it is not the only one. It is simply the one that stands for all. The Library of Alexandria shows us that memory is fragile. The House of Wisdom, the Mayan codices, Nalanda, and modern wars confirm it. Time and neglect whisper the same warning. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not just fire, it is forgetting. From this fragility, we turn to our responsibility. If memory can be lost so easily, what must we do to preserve it? That is where we go next. We are the new Alexandrians. In antiquity, the Library of Alexandria was humanity's first attempt at a universal memory. Today, we have built something even greater, the Internet. Billions of books, papers, videos, and voices are stored online. Wikipedia alone holds more knowledge than all of antiquity combined. Medical research, satellite data, entire genomes, recorded, indexed, and shared. In some ways, we have fulfilled the Ptolemy's dream. We are the new Alexandrians, curators of humanity's memory. But with this achievement comes responsibility. For what we have built is just as fragile, if not more so, than the scrolls of old, the fragility of digital memory. It is tempting to believe the internet is permanent, but it is not. Servers crash. If companies collapse, their archives vanish. Think of GeoCities, MySpace, countless forums, entire communities erased overnight. Formats die. Files on floppy disks or outdated systems become unreadable. Censorship strikes. Governments block, ban, or delete content, reshaping history at will. Dependence on power. Without electricity, without global infrastructure, the digital world collapses instantly. Like papyrus, digital knowledge must be copied, backed up, and actively maintained. Otherwise, the internet could one day face its own Alexandria moment. Mini-story, the lost NASA tapes. In 1969, humans walked on the moon. But the original high-quality videotapes of Apollo 11? Lost. NASA taped over them in the 1980s due to storage shortages. If even humanity's proudest moment can be erased by carelessness, how safe is any memory? This story is our warning. Preservation is never passive. Redundancy is survival. The key lesson from Alexandria is that knowledge must exist in many places at once. A single library, no matter how great, is too fragile. Today, this means global backups in multiple continents, libraries and archives sharing collections freely, cloud systems that mirror data across servers, open access, so knowledge is not locked in one nation or company. The Library of Alexandria was vulnerable because it centralized memory. We must decentralize it. The role of librarians, archivists, and coders. In every age, memory has guardians. In Alexandria, it was scribes who copied scrolls tirelessly. In medieval monasteries, monks preserved ancient texts. Today, it is librarians, archivists, and coders who ensure books, data, and code are not lost. These roles may seem humble, but they are heroic. Without them, knowledge would dissolve. In a sense, every librarian today is an Alexandrian priest of memory, guarding the flame against the dark. Mini-story, the librarian's oath. Imagine a modern librarian standing in a quiet hall of shelves. She whispers an oath. I will not let it burn again. Not by fire, not by neglect, not by silence. This is the promise every guardian of memory makes, whether holding papyrus, parchment, or terabytes of data. Open knowledge versus locked knowledge. One of the most dangerous threats to preservation today is not fire, but profit. Academic journals hide research behind paywalls. Companies lock knowledge in patents. Nations classify discoveries as secrets. But what good is knowledge if it is hidden? Alexandria dreamed of universality, not for kings only, but for all. Today we must ask, are we building a new library for all humanity, or a gated archive for the few? Movements like open access publishing, Creative Commons, and Wikipedia embody the Alexandrian dream. They ensure knowledge is not hoarded, but shared. The ethics of preservation. Preservation is not neutral, it is moral. To choose which knowledge to save and which to erase is to decide what future generations will know. The Ptolemies preserved what they valued, but what voices were lost? Conquerors burned what they hated, but what wisdom was erased? Today, our algorithms and institutions decide what survives online. Do we preserve every voice, every story, or only those that fit certain narratives? The library warns us erasure is not always fire. Sometimes it is silence, exclusion, or neglect. Mini Story, The Vanishing Tweet. A historian in the year 2500 studies the 21st century. She discovers that billions of tweets, posts, and videos were never preserved. Our daily conversations, our voices, are gone. To her, it seems as if entire generations never spoke. This is the silent Alexandria we risk today, not burning scrolls, but deleting servers. Human responsibility. Ultimately, the responsibility of preservation falls on us, not only on governments or libraries, but on every person. Back up your work. Value your history. Defend free access. Teach the young to treasure knowledge. The library fell because humanity did not protect it. If we do not protect our own memory, we will repeat the same mistake. We are the new Alexandrians. The Internet is our library, but memory is fragile, and preservation is not automatic. Our responsibility is clear: to copy, to share, to protect, and to open knowledge to all. Only then can we ensure that the dream of Alexandria lives, not as myth, but as reality. From here, we turn to the other great lesson of the library: the eternal battle between knowledge and power, the eternal struggle. From the moment the first scroll was written, knowledge has been power. And where there is power, rulers seek to control it. The Library of Alexandria was not only a treasure of wisdom, it was a weapon. Whoever controlled it, controlled memory itself. The Ptolemies knew this. Rome knew this. Religious authorities knew this. And it is no different today. The library's destruction, whether by fire, decree, or neglect, was never just about paper. It was about who gets to decide what humanity remembers. When rulers fear knowledge, throughout history, those in power have feared knowledge that undermines them. In Alexandria, Caesar's war prioritized victory over scrolls. Theodosius' edict feared pagan wisdom. In imperial China, emperors ordered book burnings to erase rival philosophies. In medieval Europe, the church silenced heretical gospels and banned certain texts. Censorship is not random, it is strategic. It seeks to protect authority by controlling truth. The library warns us, when rulers decide what is remembered, whole worlds of possibility vanish. Mini-story, Hypatia's silence. When Hypatia was murdered in 415 CE, it was not only her body that was destroyed, it was her voice. She represented reason, mathematics, inquiry, everything threatening to those who wanted control. Killing her was not only political, it was symbolic. It was the silencing of a worldview. Every act of censorship echoes Hypatia's fate. Voices torn out of history. Modern parallels. The battle over knowledge is not ancient history. It continues today. Governments censoring the Internet. Certain regimes block entire platforms, filter search engines, or erase articles that challenge their narratives. Book bans. Even in democracies, school boards or politicians ban books on race, gender, or politics. Propaganda rewriting history, nations reshape textbooks to glorify themselves and erase atrocities. Each act mirrors Alexandria's destruction. The tools are modern, but the logic is the same. Control memory, control power, the cost of censorship. When knowledge is censored, society pays. Scientific progress stalls when inconvenient research is suppressed. Injustices thrive when history is erased. Cultures weaken when their voices are silenced. The library's myth shows us the price of forgetting. Every burned scroll, every banned book, every censored post is another step into ignorance. Mini story, the forbidden book. In a small village centuries ago, a scholar hides a forbidden manuscript beneath floorboards. Authorities hunt for it, claiming it is dangerous. Years later, it is found too late, damaged, unreadable. What wisdom did it contain? Perhaps a cure? Perhaps a philosophy? Perhaps nothing. But the possibility is lost. This is the cruelty of censorship. Not only the loss of what we know, but the loss of what might have been. The digital battleground. Today, the struggle has shifted online. The Internet is the closest thing humanity has to a new Library of Alexandria, but it is vulnerable to control. Algorithms decide visibility. Corporations, not kings, now shape what knowledge spreads. Censorship by deletion. Posts vanish, accounts are erased, voices silenced without record. Surveillance. Authorities monitor what is read, watched, and shared. If Alexandria warned us of fire, the Internet warns us of invisible censorship. Scrolls may not burn, but they can be made to disappear from view as if they never existed. Knowledge as resistance. Yet knowledge also resists. Every banned book that is smuggled, every censored post that is mirrored elsewhere, every archive that preserves truth is an act of defiance. In Nazi Germany, underground presses distributed forbidden texts. In Soviet Russia, samizdat, self-publishing, spread censored works secretly. Today, activists use VPNs, encryption, and digital archives to resist censorship. The spirit of Alexandria lives in this resistance, the belief that memory must not belong to rulers, but to all. Mini-story, the hidden server. Imagine a hidden server in a basement in 2025. It mirrors banned websites from across the world. If authorities shut down one site, the mirror lives elsewhere. Like scribes in Alexandria, coders copy tirelessly, ensuring memory cannot be silenced. This is the modern version of scroll copying, a digital scriptorium against censorship, the library's warning for us. What does the library teach us about censorship? When power fears truth, it will attack memory. Erasure is permanent. Once knowledge is destroyed, it may never return. Resistance is survival. Knowledge must be copied, hidden, smuggled, mirrored, whatever it takes. The library's myth is not just about the past. It is a warning for our present and future. The Library of Alexandria burned because rulers feared what it contained or cared too little to protect it. The same struggle exists today. Every act of censorship, ancient or modern, asks the same question. Who controls truth? If the answer is rulers, humanity loses. If the answer is all of us, humanity wins. And so, we turn to the final reflection, the eternal what if. Not only what if the library survived, but what if we let our memory burn again? The haunting question. Every time the Library of Alexandria is mentioned, one question rises like smoke from its ruins. What if it had survived? What if the scrolls of Herophilos had given us modern medicine 2,000 years ago? What if Hero's steam engines had sparked an industrial revolution in antiquity? What if Aristotle's lost works, the Mayan codices, the Buddhist scriptures of Nalanda, all had been preserved? Would we already live among the stars? Would we have avoided centuries of suffering, war, and plague? We cannot know. But the what if haunts us because it forces us to imagine not only what we lost, but what we are still capable of losing. The weight of lost time. Carl Sagan, once mourned that had the library survived, we might now be venturing among the stars. To him, the tragedy was not only the scrolls lost, but the centuries stolen. How many lives might have been saved if medicine had advanced earlier? How many wars might have been avoided if philosophy had spread faster? How many voices might have been heard if knowledge had been shared sooner? The library's silence is measured not only in books, but in generations. Mini story, a future that never was. Picture a child in Rome around 300 CE, coughing with pneumonia. In our timeline, he dies, as millions did, for lack of antibiotics. In this alternate world, where Alexandrian medicine advanced earlier, he is cured. He grows, becomes a scholar, invents a new device, saves thousands more. Now multiply that story by millions. That is what we lost. Not just books, lives, futures, entire worlds that never came to be, the modern Alexandria. And yet, the dream is not dead. The internet, global universities, space telescopes, DNA archives, all are our attempt to build a new Library of Alexandria. We live in a world where knowledge is more abundant and more accessible than at any time in history. A teenager with a smartphone today has more information at their fingertips than the greatest scholars of antiquity. In some ways, the Ptolemy's dream has been realized, but the fragility remains. Our Alexandria is digital, vulnerable not to papyrus fires, but to blackouts, hacks, censorship, and neglect. The what-if of the past must become the never again of the present. Knowledge as a collective treasure. The library teaches us that knowledge is not a luxury. It is survival. It is freedom. It is progress. When knowledge is hoarded, humanity stagnates. When knowledge is censored, humanity suffers. When knowledge is shared, humanity thrives. Our task is not only to learn, but to protect what we learn. Every book, every database, every archive is a flame in the darkness. Together, they form the fire that lights the path of civilization. Mini story. The archivist of tomorrow. Imagine a woman in the year 2300. She is an archivist on Mars, standing in a library dome beneath a red sky. Around her are servers, books, holograms, and scrolls. Among them is a digital copy of every surviving text from Earth's history. She whispers to herself, "This time it will not burn." That is the ultimate legacy of Alexandria, not only to mourn what was lost, but to inspire what we must protect. The responsibility of the future, the what-if of Alexandria points us forward. What if we allow today's knowledge to vanish through neglect? What if censorship erases truths that future generations need? What if war or disaster wipes out our digital archives? But also, what if we succeed in preserving everything? What if no voice is ever silenced again? What if humanity never forgets? This is the what if we can control. The library as eternal dream. The Library of Alexandria is gone. But the dream it carried is eternal, a world where all wisdom is gathered, preserved, and shared. It is a dream reborn in monasteries, in Baghdad's House of Wisdom, in Europe's universities, in the Enlightenment, in modern science, and now in the digital cloud. Each generation must decide whether to carry the flame or let it die. The library whispers, "Do not fail again." Closing reflection. The Library of Alexandria was not just a building, it was humanity's first great attempt to remember itself. Its loss was not only a tragedy of the past, but a warning for the future. We grieve what was lost. We imagine what could have been, but we also carry its lesson. Knowledge is fragile, but it is also powerful. If we protect it, It can lift us beyond ignorance, beyond war, beyond earth itself. The eternal what if is not only about the past, it is about the choice we face now. Will we let our library burn again, or will we build one that never dies?